Okay, it's Dr. Vatiri again, and we're still moving along in our Dominion diet lessons. And this segment is going to cover two main topics. One, understanding how we can make some effective substitutions, especially in the foods that are not the best foods for us. And then, how to juggle the categories, okay? How to sort of, and this is a bad word, but cheat, okay? And use the system to work in your favor. Now, the first thing we want to understand is making some solid substitutions, okay? And I'm going to cover each category, and especially the categories that need substitution, so you can see where I'm going with this. The first area and the most obvious one is our carbohydrate, grains, and starch group of food products. Those are the ones that are going to be the products that you can make the most effective substitutions from a not so healthy form of that food product to a more healthier form. Okay, so the first one I want to cover is our grains, and a lot of people have rice as part of their staple food, and white rice seems to be the most popular rice of choice. Now, white rice, yellow rice, which is just colored with either some seasoning or saffron or something that makes the white rice look yellow, is still white rice. Okay, brown rice, mahogany rice, and other grains such as spelt or barley or oats, those grains are all in the grain family, and the difference is with the white rice or the simple rice and the whole grain rice is that the whole grain has the whole grain, meaning that not only do you have the inside, but you have the husk, which makes the rice brown or some other color, or some other grain a color other than white. Now, the reason why we want to substitute it is for a number of reasons. One, the whole grain rice, or the whole grain food family of foods, are going to be much higher in fiber than would be regular white rice. The glycemic index of the whole grain is going to be much lower, meaning that the ability of that food, when it's being digested and processed through the liver, will go into the bloodstream slower as glucose or sugars, as opposed to white rice, which has a higher glycemic index and therefore goes into the blood much quicker than the whole grain. Now, the only downside is that it takes a little longer to cook the whole grain, okay, because when you're boiling the water and you're trying to hydrate the grain, it has to go through the husk, and the whole grain itself needs to be hydrated before you can eat it, or it'll be too hard. And you don't want to eat whole grains before they're cooked, because one, it's going to be very difficult to just chew, and second of all, you don't want it to continue the process of hydration or cooking in your stomach. It can cause serious digestive problems, especially in the stomach and in the lower and the beginning part of the small intestines. So the whole grains will take a little bit longer, but it's worth the substitution, meaning that what you want to do is understand, first of all, that the grain itself, be it whole brown rice or white rice, will be approximately the same amount of calories, but it will be much healthier for you because it's lower in the glycemic index, much higher in the fiber, and most of the nutrients, most of the vitamins and minerals that you're going to derive from your grains are going to be in the husk. So you don't want to not have that. It's very healthy to have that. Plus, it'll fill you up faster. Okay, if you have a whole grain as opposed to simple white rice, it will hold you over between meals much more significantly than just white rice. Okay, there's a saying that when you're eating Chinese food and you're hungry, maybe a half hour later, it's not for any other reason, is that you're eating usually white rice. That's a lot of vegetables in it. The portions of meat are cut very thin, so you're eating, it bulks up a little bit, but then you're hungry because you're not having enough fiber and or enough sugars in that meal to sort of sustain you for a longer period of time. So the whole grain itself will sustain you for a much longer period of time. So switching from white rice to brown rice is one of your first and most basic substitutions. The texture, especially when you're dealing with young children, the texture of the whole grain rice is definitely different. They may complain. But what you need to do is be persistent, especially when you're cooking for the entire family. And this is what it is. Okay, we're going to have this type of rice. Now, again, in the spirit of slow incremental changes, if you make one package of white rice and one package of whole grain, and you mix it together, it'll be a slow indoctrination to the whole grain or to the brown rice. And that's something that you would want to try. Remember, anything that slowly changes from not so healthy to much more healthier, do it. Do it over slow incremental changes. Okay, white bread, whole wheat bread, whole grain bread, whole sprout bread. The rule of thumb is the heavier the bread, probably the more whole grain it is. Sprout bread is another very good choice, like the Ezekiel breads. Another very good choice for a whole grain or a whole sprout alternative. Calorie-wise, some of these whole grain breads may be slightly higher in calorie than a simple white bread. But bread in general is usually somewhere between 100 calories to 120 calories depending on the size of the bread. Okay, those breads that they say they're low-cal breads, of course, they're the size slightly bigger than a cracker, and they're 60 calories because it's minute. A regular piece of bread is usually around 100 to 120 calories per slice, regardless if it's whole grain or regular white bread. The key, though, is to start switching to multi-grain, whole grain, and the sprout bread. Now, one of the other things you could do as far as the breads are concerned, as a way to check the level of fiber in the bread, other than calculating it on the back of the wrapper of the bread, if you get that slice of bread and you fold it and it cracks, okay, like just splits in half from folding it, it's probably a good whole grain bread with not a lot of added oils or other hydrogenated oils in the bread. But if you get it and it bends and it folds like good old-fashioned white bread, I would question the level of fiber in that bread. So that's another change we can make. Another change we can make with potatoes is that if you're going to have regular white potatoes, either bake it or mash it or broil it or boil the potatoes, keep the skin on. Okay, the skin, any foods that you can actually keep the skin on will always decrease the glycemic index of the food and will always add extra nutrients along with fiber, minerals, and vitamins to the meal itself. So with the potatoes, okay, if you're going to make the potatoes, leave the skin on. You have a baked potato, eat the skin. You may not be used to it, but it's filled with nutritional value. A sweet potato has a lower glycemic index than a regular potato. And mix it up. And again, eat the skin. Okay, clean it thoroughly. And if you bake it or however you choose to prepare it, you know what? Put the skin into it, and if the kids are going to complain, just say this is a new style. I'm not sure what story you want to make up, but the point is that incrementally add these high fiber foods in by switching from the higher glycemic index foods to the lower ones, from the foods that have low fiber to more of a high fiber. When it comes to pastas, the same thing. You can have the regular wheat semolina, which is the wheat is processed down to a fine white flour before it's made back into pasta, or you can get the whole grain pasta. They also make a whole grain brown rice version of pasta. I'm not a huge fan of it. Some people like it, but the regular whole grain pastas work well, and more than they have some designer pastas that are made from spinach and artichoke and stuff like that. Those are usually whole grain. They're a little bit more expensive, but you know what? It's well worth it. You're not going to go broke spending 39 extra cents on your box of pasta. And again, with the pastas, one of the things that or the rice, and for that matter, when you're making those substitution, especially if you're used to having pasta with a vegetable, you want to make it as green as possible. So if you're used to making pasta and you're putting some broccoli in it, what you want to do, and you have, like, say, a cup of pasta, maybe rigatoni's, and you may have a cup of broccoli, you may want to diminish the amount of pasta, increase the amount of vegetables. It's going to look greener. It's going to taste relatively the same per bite, okay? But it's just going to have more vegetable than pasta, which means that you're going to have more fiber, less carbohydrates, and more nutrition than just having it with a more of a carbohydrate base to it. The same thing goes with the rice and something else. Okay, if you're used to having white rice and beans, you may want to go with brown rice and peas and have a lot more peas than you normally would want to put in it. Again, just substituting the carbohydrates, substituting the plates. This also works with the breakfast cereals. Okay, a cup of oatmeal is a certain amount of calories depending on the brand that you get it from. Usually it's around 100 to 150 calories per cupful. But if you have the whole grain oatmeal, meaning the one that you have to cook, okay, not the instant one. The instant one's already processed down. Same amount of calories, significantly less fiber, okay? So that goes with all the breakfast cereals, even the cold cereals, okay? The ones that are made from whole grain oats or whole grain, other whole grains are going to be in and around the same calories, but again, increased amount of fiber. Okay, and they'll tell you, and then a lot of these cereals, they'll promote that they're heart friendly because they have a higher level of fiber than would be the sugary, processed flakes that that we loved so much when we were kids. But nonetheless, it's making those substitutions. Okay, if you're used to using whole milk, go down to skim milk. I'm not a big fan of milk. You want to use almond milk or soy milk, probably a better choice. Okay, so that's part of, that's the main part of that food group of substitution. The next, when we deal with the proteins, our protein substitutions, okay, our protein substitutions are going to be going more towards having the white flaky fish instead of having the fried, the fried fish. You want to bake it and broil it instead of frying it. Same thing with the chicken. You want to bake it or broil it instead of frying it. It's in the preparation. Red meat, okay, listen, I'm not going to lie. I like a nice filet mignon like anybody else. I'm not having it every week, but if I'm going to have steak, which I don't have quite often, it's going to be a good cut of steak, very lean. You don't need the animal fat. It does nothing for you. There's no nutritional value at all. You need to have protein in your diet, and you can get plenty of good protein from, organically farm-raised chickens. You can get it, obviously, from beans and legumes and eggs. But if you're going to have the meat protein, the chicken and the turkey would be a better choice than would be, a fried pork chop. And the fish choices, you want to go with the white flaky fish like tilapia or sole, which you can broil or bake, put a little lemon on it, okay, and some other seasoning, some garlic, some herbs. It comes out delicious, extremely low in calories, decent protein. Other fish, which is excellent for you, of course, is codfish and salmon, which is excellent as far as getting a good source of protein and the omega-3, 6, and 9 fatty acids, which are essential for not only good healthy skin, nails, hair, but excellent for your cardiovascular system. Okay, so we'll take a quick break now, and we'll come back. I'll go over a couple of more substitutions with you, and then I'll teach you about juggling your chart.